Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm impressed you all found the room, because I nearly didn't find the room. I think one of the things we all really love about DevOps is the practical sessions that give us the tips we need to do the things that we're doing every day, which is why I'm going to be talking about how to embed an application server in a hat, because I know that, in your day-to-day life, this is the sort of thing that you need to be doing. I'm going to start with a bit of context, a bit of background. Why is this interesting? I'm going to go way back to 1949. It's easy to laugh at these sort of things, but in 1949, popular mechanics said, computers in the future may weigh no more than 1.5 tons. Thomas Watson, the chair of IBM, so obviously I have to put it in, he said, I think there's a world market for maybe 5 computers. So again, it's easy to laugh, but actually that prediction was true for 5 or 10 years. But back then, computers were hard. They were big. They took up a whole room. If you were going to program one, you needed to have quite a lot of skills like paper punching and connecting things together. Oh,
Static.
thank you. Whereas today, we're somewhere quite different. Oops. Instead of having 5 computers in the whole world, I counted, and I think I had 5 computers in my bag just now. There's computers in our fridge, there's computers in our cars, in our phones, in our washing machines, in our toasters. I think my fridge is actually smarter than me, which is a fairly sorry state of affairs. Well, what does this mean for us? How do we take advantage of this? Computers are everywhere, that's great. What does it get us? How do we take advantage? Well, for this, I'm going to defer to an expert. If your background is in the programming of PCs or even more powerful computers, a fair warning. Embedded programming for low-cost devices means working with very limited resources. Embedded platforms only provide a small subset of the functionality of their larger cousins, which may require some inventiveness and work where a desired feature is not available directly. What this is saying is that when you work with these embedded devices, you can't just use the programming models you're used to, you can't just use the programming styles you're used to, because it won't work. The devices don't have the power. So this is a quote from Getting Started with the Internet of Things. And that was published in June 2011. And interestingly, I would argue that between then and now, the world has changed enough that that's completely wrong. So what's changed? Well, the hardware hasn't changed that much. When Getting Started with the Internet of Things was written, the target device was an Arduino. What I'm going to be showing you is a Raspberry Pi. The two devices are a little bit different. The Raspberry Pi has a bit more meat on it, but they're fundamentally similar in terms of the constraints that are there. So what's the difference? Well, I think the difference is the software that we run on them. In 2010, an application server was a pretty big thing. But application servers, they're getting smaller and they're getting more flexible. One of the technologies that really enables this flexibility is OSGI. I'm going to be doing a full-length talk on OSGI tomorrow if you're interested. I talk a lot about OSGI. I think it's fabulous. I think the sorts of things that OSGI enables on embedded devices is a real proof of the technology. So, what would you do with a small server? Why is a small server any better than a big server? Well, big servers are good for server rooms, but they're not so good in other environments. So I've got here a guess what Holly was trying to draw exercise. I've given this talk a few times. Every time, the entire room has been absolutely baffled by what I was trying to get across. But I keep hoping, eventually, someone's gonna get it. So, what's a small server good for? Any ideas yet? Nope. Nope. The lesson here is don't give up my day job. So what I was trying to draw, there was a developer. So developers, sorry about that. When an application is running in deployment, it doesn't get restarted very many times. The configuration doesn't change very many times. If it does, there's something gone terribly wrong. As developers, what we tend to do is we write something, it doesn't work. We tweak it, we try again, we tweak it, we try again. We discover the configuration was wrong. We change the configuration. I go through this maybe one time a minute when I'm developing. And so if your server is really quite big and quite slow, that's not really a pleasant development experience. You need something a bit more nimble, a bit more lightweight. It happens that the nimble and lightweightness of servers is good for a second thing, which I gave you a sneak preview of. Now, unless I've got it terribly wrong, this one should be easier for you to guess. Yeah, it's for the cloud. And so what we need for cloud servers is you need density. You need to be able to pack quite a lot of servers onto a fairly fixed amount of hardware because you're paying for that hardware. And other people also want to use the hardware. But you also need elasticity in the cloud. So you need to be able to start with one thing and then say, actually, I need something a bit bigger, I need something a bit different. And there's a third thing. Excuse me a moment. I'm going for a DevOps first. Speaker loses voice on stage. So there's a third thing. Those two they're right here, they're right now. Developers are using lightweight servers. The cloud is using lightweight servers. This is more speculative. I think this is where the future is going, which is ubiquitous computing plus. When we talk about computers, running in fridges, we're not talking about an application server running in the fridge. There's not an application server running in the car. Not at the moment. I think in the future, there may be. So in the new world, that's the old new world, that's sort of the current new world, but the old new world, we all know mobile technology, and it's an absolutely massive trend. But it's a trend on the client side. This isn't really rocket science, right? Clients are mobile, servers are not mobile, so obviously, mobile technology, it's a client-side thing. I think this is changing. Servers are becoming more lightweight. And that's sort of a literal statement. You can take a server and you can carry it around in your pocket in a way that you couldn't a few years ago. And I think this is going to signal a trend from location-based services, which is what we have now, to locatable services. So rather than the client moving around and telling the server where it is, the actual server can move around as well. So I'm going to talk a bit about the Websphere Liberty profile, because that's what I've used as the basis for this demo. And I'm not here to sell Liberty, partly because it's free for developers, but I am on the development team that wrote it. We're very, very proud of it. We think we've done something really cool. So I'd like to tell you a bit about it. It's an incredibly lightweight server. So it's a 50 megabyte download. To run quite a meaty JEE app, it's maybe a 60 meg memory footprint. It starts under 5 seconds. So that means you can just bring it up and bring it down and bring it up and bring it down. But in fact, you don't have to bring it up and bring it up and bring it down, because it's very modular, it's very dynamic. So you can change things on the fly, you can add features, you can remove features. You don't need to restart it. So that's the thing we love the most about it, is just that there's no restarts. And how does it achieve this? Well, this comes back to the OSGI that I was talking about before. It has a small kernel, and then there's a whole bunch of other features that you can add. And so you can see this is getting towards a quite full-featured application server if you add them all. But of course, you don't have to add them all. You can add just one or two, perhaps Servlet and JSP, Or you could change your mind, decide you didn't really want JSP after all, servlet's fine. Then you could decide, well, actually, I'd really like to do some OSGI applications as well. I'd like a WAB. And then I want JPA. No, I changed my mind. I don't want a WAB after all. So what can you do with it? Well, my colleagues have been going a bit crazy with how lightweight the Liberty profile is. So the first thing they did is they put it on a Nexus 7 tablet. They've also got it running on an ASUS transformer. They've got it running on a phone. So one of my colleagues got it running on his Android phone. But in fact, he didn't want to use his current Android phone that he's using every day because he's using it. So he dug one out of his drawer, and it's actually an Android phone that's a few years old that's running a full-featured application server. And of course, the final thing that it can run on is a Raspberry Pi. Again, when I first started talking about this, I'd ask who in the room had heard of a Raspberry Pi. I think if I asked that, the only people who didn't raise their hands were the ones who were asleep. We've got Raspberry Pis everywhere. They're running a lot of the screens for the conference. They're being given away. It's a pretty everywhere technology now. But who in the room has seen an application server running on a Raspberry Pi? A few. And who in the room has seen a Raspberry Pi running an application server inside a hat? Anybody? I love it. No one's ever seen it. For good reasons, obviously, which is why would you want to? So I'm going to gloss over this, except to mention that the Raspberry Pi is so cheap that I think, again, this sort of signals, at the moment, a lot of the booths downstairs, they give away flash drives. Whereas a few years ago, if you got a flash drive, you were like, wow, I've got a flash drive, this is so cool. I reckon in a few years, if you wander around downstairs, people will be giving away computers. They'll be giving away Raspberry Pis or their successor, because it's just becoming a commodity. It's becoming sort of semi-disposable. So getting back to the question of why on earth would you want to put a Raspberry Pi in a hat? Why isn't it good enough to have the client mobile and the server not mobile? Well, it enables collaboration without the internet. All our mobile devices so far assume that you have internet. That's half true at Devoxx. It's not true in a lot of places in the world, particularly if there's a bit of a, some sort of infrastructure problem. Then you can't rely on the internet. You still need to collaborate. A server enables that. So let me get to the hat. Can we switch back to the... Thank you. Otherwise, I think I will struggle with hands. So what I have here is I have my extremely sophisticated technical setup here. So I've got my Raspberry Pi. I've also got another piece of kit. Who here's heard of Tinkerforge? A few people, yeah. There was a talk on it yesterday. So I've got a bit of Tinkerforge technology here. So I've got a few bricks and bricklets. It's sort of a plug and play for physical computing. So I've got here a temperature sensor. I've also got my Raspberry Pi running off a battery so that I could carry it around. But sadly, this is one of the lessons we're learning about the Raspberry Pi. I've got a Wi-Fi dongle for my Pi, and it cannot connect to the conference Wi-Fi. My phone can't connect to the conference Wi-Fi, so I don't think it's a particular problem of the Pi. But I've given this demo a few times. At home, the Raspberry Pi can connect to my internet seamlessly. I can bridge the internet from my laptop. It works great. If I go out into the real world, no Wi-Fi. So as you can see, to compensate, I have it connected by an Ethernet cable. And I was hoping that everyone in the room could connect to the Pi as well, but in the absence of Wi-Fi, that's not going to work. And the last piece of the setup is a sock. And obviously, this is a very important technical component. And this is tidying up a lot of the wires. So if I take my Pi with my temperature sensor, and I put it on my head, then you can see it's a very, very dignified display. Now, I've got a web page here. And it looks like the demo gods have stricken me down. And I have an application server which is not running on a hat. And so you could see, actually, what I could have done is I could have just put a stupid hat on my head and talked for 15 minutes, and it would have had the same effect. If I tell you all that it was running fine just before the talk, will anybody believe me? No. And see, it was measuring the temperature of my head, and so the application would change its state depending on how, whether the hat was on the head or off the head. It was really quite cool. No. Oh, well. So it's not just the conference Wi-Fi, it's the whole setup. But thank you very much for watching me not show an application server running in a hat. And if you come find me later, it will be working then again, I promise, and I can show it to you. Thank you.